Hey, what's going on? It's at the letters for Monday, March 14th. Don't often record on a Monday. Weird to say that. Arden Zwelling, Ben Nicholson Smith, our producers, as always, Christian Ryan and Nick Andrade. Thanks to them. Thanks to you for being with us for what feels like an official kickoff, I'd say, to the 2022 ATL season, the 2022 Blue Jays season, which is going to be getting underway a lot quicker than any of us realize, really, with this delayed spring training. Pitchers, catchers, position players, everybody is in Dunedin, Florida, racing to get ready for this thing. Ben and I are in Toronto right now, but we will be in Dunedin in the coming weeks and producing some ATL content. So that's going to be really exciting. Really looking forward to that. I almost don't want to spend too much time on the lockout, Ben, but I feel like we got to touch on it off the top. Yeah, it's funny how quickly the page has turned, and all of a sudden, like, you see these shots and images from Dunedin or from Florida, from Arizona, and it's like you just put it in the rear view and you just forget about it. But the lockout really did dominate the baseball discourse for 99 days. So, cliche question. What did we learn? What came of those 99 bitter, demoralizing days that we spent locked out?
Yeah, they were not the best 99 days to be a Blue Jays fan, to be a baseball fan. I think that's pretty clear. Then now that you start seeing the arrivals of Kevin Gausman and Jose Barrios, even Josh Donaldson showing up in pinstripes, it's a reminder that's what we're anticipating and looking forward to this time of year. And it is great to be back into that zone. But of course, the lockout was a massive event, a massive kind of experience for all those players and of course for the owners as well. Pretty significant, and I think we learned a lot. I think that at the end of it, I mean, it's great that it's done. It's great that it's over. I think the players made some real strides. I mean, we're not talking seats on buses here. We're talking about additional money for young players. We're talking about significant raises in the CBT. These are big things. So the players made some gains. The owners added some revenue streams. This was never a zero-sum game. It's possible for both sides to come out ahead and to make gains. And I do think that that's what happened here.
And the players were never going to claw back enormous gains, right? The gains were always going to be, marginal in nature, I guess. 'Cause that's just the nature of the beast and what you go through. I can't say that I feel tremendous coming out of it. I can't say that I, feel particularly positive about the whole thing. I mean, you think about it, man, like that, they didn't go over the cliff, but they came right up to the edge of the cliff. I mean, I know we saw a lot of deadlines being thrown around in the days preceding the end of the lockout, and obviously a lot of those were false deadlines. But like, do you agree with me that, I mean, this thing was within 12 hours of like very serious cancellations of regular season games, really eating into the schedule and getting to a point where we were going to have a conversation about not only pro rata pay, but service time that was going to be like a really big hinge in these discussions and really could have made this something that lasted a lot longer than it did.
There's no doubt that we were close to that. I think you look at the way the votes fell, and as the votes were coming in, this is on Thursday, it feels like things have shifted so quickly. Like, it feels so distant already, almost. But it was only Thursday. The votes were coming in. I was hearing some things from people about some no's coming in, and the executive council voted. Everyone on the executive council, including Max Scherzer, Marcus Semien, they all voted no. They wanted to continue bargaining. They wanted to find a way to reach an even better deal for the players from their standpoint. And so there's no question that we were close to the players rejecting that proposal. Much of their leadership wanted them to reject that proposal, and instead they ended up accepting it. I think you're right to say that the players were never going to destroy the Major League Baseball negotiating team. It's not a group of individuals that you are going to destroy in a negotiation. You can make some slight gains. You can make it improved for sure in a meaningful way, and I think they did that. But just in the same way that the union wasn't about to be crushed, it was too strong for that. You're not going to crush the MLB owners in a negotiation either. So they did make some gains, and that's something.
Man, and the owners are so good at this, aren't they? Like, it's sort of why I come away feeling so like I don't know. I don't want to be too pessimistic about it or like cynical or dystopian about it, but like when the owners brought up that international draft issue right at the end there, right? And this is on the heels of everything, the entire script the ownership side had run up to that point from, the lockout, which was the owner's lockout in the first place, to the, 43 days before their first proposal, to the very marginal incremental increases in proposals after that, which just satisfied like the legal definition of bargaining in good faith, to a lot of the like just kind of 11th hour things that would get snuck into proposals that the players like. And then the international draft which came around, which was like diabolical, man. Like just bringing that up at the 11th hour, like it was so devious. And like, look, man, I guess kind of brilliant if you really love labor law and you really love cold-hearted negotiation, but like, I mean, it just, what a great way to divide the union if that's what you're looking to do, right? To split it along some really sensitive cultural lines, in a way that also leverages a group of players who aren't even members of the union, like, and may never be members of the union, in a way that sort of throws under the bus a bunch of people who don't even have a seat at the table, for the owners to just like hammer that wedge right between a percentage of the union that came up through the international system and lived those experiences, right? And like fought their way into the game through immense hardship and like frankly often exploitation, and to just like wedge them from the group that grew up with a lot more privilege in North America and came through the amateur North American draft. Maybe they went to Vanderbilt on a full scholarship, and those individuals are thinking like, well, what do I care about an international draft? It was just so devious and brilliant, and it's kind of lost history, right? Like, we're not going to talk about it anymore, that came up when it came up, but that really was like that really just sort of represented the greater whole of how I felt about the whole process, which was like, man, this is a dystopian thing that we just went through.
Yeah, and it didn't get as bad as it could have, for sure, which is a relief. To twice go through the experience of Major League Baseball canceling games. An announcement from Rob Manfred: these games have been canceled. Yeah. That happened twice. That's pretty serious stuff. And then, like you said, the international draft at the end there. I mean, it really. I think there's no doubt that every move that the owners made in this process was planned, and it was not an accident. They are very strategic, and their strategy led them to a good outcome that will benefit the owners. But as you say, in the international draft, I actually think, and this is from talking to some people who are much more experienced in that realm, and in those countries and in those cultures than I am, but my impression is, from having those conversations, that the international draft is not necessarily a bad thing. Like, the current system is completely corrupt. It does not benefit the people it is designed to benefit. You have 12 and 13-year-old children being scouted by these scouts. You have these buscones acting as middlemen, taking massive cuts of the bonuses that should go to the players, basically pre-selling these deals when they're 12 or 13, then reselling them at 16. Like, it is a awful system. It is corrupt. It does not benefit the people it's intended to benefit. And there are a lot of people at the end of that whole process that sit there with no education, no real bonus to speak of, and they're kind of at a loss because not everyone ends up being Fernando Tatis Jr. or Vladimir Guerrero Jr. So, with that being said, there are different ways to approach that, and the 11th hour tosses into the negotiations. Is that the best way? I mean, at the same time, this isn't the first time it's been broached as a topic either. So a lot of kind of complications and nuance there. Like, I was really in the weeds with this stuff for the last couple of weeks, and I did enjoy diving into it, but it's not as fun as the actual Major League Baseball.
Yeah, but what's so devious about it is that the owners then put it on the players to correct that system. Like, why
Sure.
is this the fault of the union?
And
MLB has allowed this to happen through decades and decades of neglect.
And you could say the same thing about service time manipulation, right? They make it to the point that players have to seek concessions for these loopholes that owners are exploiting. But, if those loopholes didn't exist in the first place, or if they weren't exploited in the first place, then players wouldn't have to use some of their bargaining power to pull back against something like service time manipulation.
Yeah, it's not like there isn't, a rule against that. Like owners have just kind of found the gray area and the loophole, and there isn't. It isn't like there isn't a rule against what we're seeing in the international market. Like, it's a complete farce that at 12:01 a.m. every July 2nd, there is this wave of deals that just instantly come into place between two parties that technically weren't allowed to engage with one another prior to that. I mean, MLB just hasn't enforced its rules. So like, by inserting the international draft into this negotiation at the 11th hour, MLB just put the union in a position like where players had to be the ones who considered the future of like you said, of this really crooked and unethical system. But like, hang on a second, this is your system. Like, why are you putting this on us? Like, you are in charge of this. We are just the products of it. Like, we didn't institute it. We don't police it. That is your job. But now it's going to be our fault as players if it continues unabated because we rejected an international draft. Or if we do agree to an international draft, well, we might have just like alienated a very significant portion of our membership and weakened our union. It's diabolical, man. What a move.
Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of angles to that when you got people like David Ortiz trying to lobby to essentially keep it in place. Now we know that will no longer be the case. And, we'll get to the big league Blue Jays portion of ATL, of course. But I will just add
I'm getting angry again going over this stuff. Go ahead.
I mean, hey, if any fan is or a baseball observer is frustrated after 99 days of this, totally understandable. But
this
what
is
I was
going
to
for 5 years. This is the last lockout talk for 5 years. So,
and we're getting it out of our system.
Tie a bow on it.
That's right. Before we move back to 40-man roster considerations and pitching and hitting and the rest of it.
Ryan Brocky's out of options. What are they going to do?
It's that season. But with the Jays, you look at Gabriel Moreno. We were talking about this with Ben Badler a few weeks ago. But Moreno, Vlad Guerrero Jr., or Relvis Martinez, they've been so good in that market, and it's a messed up market. But you got to play within the rules. You have to, or I guess outside of the rules in this case, you have to compete. You have to operate in the reality of the constraints that exist, and the Jays have done an excellent job of that. Now, I don't think that'll change because fundamentally what that comes down to is assessing these young players, whether that's for a draft or for a free agent bonus is really secondary. But it's interesting because that really has been a strength of Andrew Tinnish and the Blue Jays in recent years.
No, yeah, absolutely. An international draft would probably hurt the Blue Jays a little bit, right? Because the Blue Jays have done a really good job on the international market. And they wouldn't be able to sort of, although now even with the hard caps, there's a limit to the resources, right?
They'll be
can
fine.
use. And the Blue Jays have had less resources recently because they've been going out and signing big time free agents like George Springer.
Right. Yeah.
But so we don't know actually yet what's going to happen with the international draft. The two sides just kind of like kicked it down the road, and that's going to be tied to the qualifying offers system. And oh boy, like putting values on those two things and how that's going to line up is not a discussion I even want to enter into right now, Ben. But this does relate a little bit to just what tangibly has come out of this new CBA and how it impacts the Blue Jays. So there's the international market there. No games lost in 2022 is a big one for the Blue Jays because you think about the teams that were withstood to be hurt the most by the cancellation of regular season games in 2022. I can't think of a team that would have stood to lose more than the Toronto Blue Jays coming off of the last 2 years that they've had. Like you think about it, like the Blue Jays have not been in Toronto really at all. They were in Toronto for like 2 months, played, I think I calculated it in a piece of something like 85% of their games over the last 2 years been played outside of Toronto. So like they have not been at home. They have been playing in minor league ballparks. They have been dealing with like trying to make those places feel like home. They've been spending millions of dollars to retrofit those places. They have been pouring money into payroll and pouring money into a new player development complex at a time when there is very little revenue coming in. So clearly outspending the revenue coming in. This is a club that would love to get the turnstiles going at Rogers Center and to start enjoying some gates and seeing some more money coming in to support the spending that we've seen. This is a young emergent team, like one that is a legitimate postseason contender, one that has very strong World Series odds, one that hasn't been connected to its city for a couple of years. And so for all those reasons and more, for the Blue Jays to have like slowly watched the 2022 regular season bleed away, if the CBA had continued, would have been excruciating and painful. So it is an extreme positive that the Blue Jays are getting 162 in 2022.
Oh man, that's the big one. That's really the big takeaway from this. I mean, as you say, there is no team in baseball that has taken more hits and faced more challenges in the last couple of years than the Toronto Blue Jays, because they were not able to play at home. So they lost a huge home field advantage. I mean, these Toronto crowds can be really supportive. They can really help. Totally disappeared, or almost entirely disappeared in the last 2 years. Vlad Jr., now entering his 4th major league season. He's played in Toronto never for a full season, not once. This will be his first full season in Toronto. So fans will get to connect with Vlad and with Bo and Springer and Barrios and Gosman, Kikuchi. I mean, the whole team will be there for the first time. So that's massive. Then you couple that with the fact that, okay, so they kind of had this home field disadvantage for a long time, right? For 2 years. Now they're going to have a home field advantage, and not only because of the fans, but let's face it, this vaccination policy the intention is to keep Canadians safe, right? It's a healthcare policy. But the reality is it's really going to help the Toronto Blue Jays, because there are very good players on the Red Sox and Yankees, and the names will come out soon if they haven't already. I mean, Arden, I think you probably, I'm sure, have heard the same rumblings that I have as far as some very big names on the Yankees and Red Sox that will not be able to play. And so, if you take, let's say it's 20 games, right? So 20 games against your biggest rivals between the Yankees and Red Sox in Toronto, it'll be 19 or 20 games. And so if they are without some of their biggest stars, meanwhile, the Jays have their fans back for the first time, Vlad Jr. is enjoying his first season in Toronto, like this is a recipe. And then you look at the fact that the Jays roster is good. It's a recipe for the Jays just to have a really good, memorable season. I think they're one of the best teams in baseball, and they're not done. So it'll be interesting to see.
Yeah, the last time the Blue Jays had a true like sellout packed Rogers Center, because remember they only were up to 15,000 and then 30,000 last year. Last time they had like a true like 45, 46,000 fans at Rogers Center was like 30 months ago. It's an insane amount of time. And you mentioned, the vaccination policy, and like, yes, look, it's important to note as well, like this could change. It's possible Canada opens its borders to the unvaccinated, to certain unvaccinated individuals at some point. Like we've already seen a fairly dramatic easing of pandemic mitigation efforts of late when it comes to vaccine passports and masking, capacity limits, things like that. But like as it stands right now, not only are those teams going to be without those players, unvaccinated players, are going to be without their salary and service time for those missed games either. And the salaries of some of the players that we're talking about, like this, it's going to be a substantial hit. But with the context of everything that we just said about what the Blue Jays have been through over the last 2 years, as it relates to the Blue Jays, I think they're just shrugging their shoulders and just saying like, too bad. Like, sorry, that's your problem. That's not ours. We just spent the last 2 seasons dealing with this, right? Like we held summer camp in 2020 in a bubble at Rogers Center. Didn't know where we were going to play until like the final days of that thing. Then we went and played at minor league stadiums and spent millions to retrofit them with like adequate lighting and facilities. We were on a road trip for like the first 4 months of 2021. We haven't had a true home game with a full ballpark in nearly 30 months. Like, I think the Blue Jays look at it as like tough luck. Like, we don't have a lot of sympathy for the Yankees or Red Sox after what we've been through since March 2020. That's your problem.
Oh, 100%. I mean, there's also an easy solution to that problem, but that's a topic for
That
another
too.
day. Yeah. I mean, I think, yeah, for the Jays, that's, they're finally just being able to return home. This is going to be, it's going to be great. I think it'll be really fun to see big crowds, roof open, full houses, I'm sure. And yeah, it's going to be a lot of baseball in a short period of time. Like we've gone not only with the lockout, but you think back for you and me, Arden, as people covering the team, like I'm thinking back now is almost, it might actually be to the day, 2 years that I was in Dunedin, Florida. And then, all right, let's get back,
Yeah.
hop on a plane with no masks and in a pandemic and just get back home. And then haven't been to Florida since. So, you mentioned we'll both be down there. We'll be doing some ATLs from down there. So definitely stay with us for that. A lot of exciting things coming down the pipe. But, it's kind of remarkable. You think about that's us. That's our experience covering the team. It's been very limited. But of course, that's true for fans too. I mean, there are tons of Jays fans out there who didn't make their annual road trip down to Toronto for a ball game last year, or who just chose not to go to the Rogers Center because of COVID restrictions or reasons or whatever the case. I think they're going to come back this year, and it'll feel really different because we haven't seen it full for Vlad and Bo. The last time we saw it full, it was like, I guess the Stroman, Sanchez, Marco Estrada, Josh Donaldson, Batista era, which feels like a long time ago right now.
Yeah, and it might be full for Donaldson again this year, which is
Yeah.
going to be interesting. Maybe we'll talk about that in the second half when we get into kind of the nitty gritty of what's been going on around baseball. Let's just wrap up this first half with a couple other CBA implications for the Blue Jays expanded postseason, 12 teams this year. We kind of went over this on a previous episode. Like, look, the Blue Jays they're positioning themselves to win the division. They're trying to win the division, so it doesn't impact them quite as much as it would have like those early mid 2000s teams that were winning like 85 to 87 games, but still gives you more margin for error, man. Like Vladimir Guerrero Jr. has to miss 2 months, or Bo Bichette goes through a big slump, or Alek Manoah isn't what you thought he was going to be, whatever. Like if some things go wrong, the error bars are just increased where you can still get into the postseason. And starting next year, 2023, more balanced schedule, which is going to mean for the Blue Jays fewer games against AL East opposition, more games against everybody else. That is only a benefit for the Toronto Blue Jays because playing in the AL East, the Rays are just pretty much always going to be good. The Yankees and the Red Sox are always going to spend a bunch of money, always going to have resources to paper over holes on their rosters. They, have a real mandate to contend perennially in their markets, as all teams do, but they actually behave like it. That can only help if the Blue Jays have less games against those teams and more games against some of the soft competition in other divisions.
Oh yeah, I think it's really good news for the entire AL East, and it's bad news for the Central, and it's bad news for the West. Like I'm just thinking of like, and I guess you pair it with the 12-team playoffs, so that's good for everyone. And I, as kind of an aside, I love the 12-team playoffs. I wasn't ready for 14. I understand, and I've heard from some people, some smart people, that hey, there's a strong case for 14. I get that, and maybe I'll be thinking about it differently in 5 years. But for now, I think 12 is perfect. That's great. And, so that opens things up for teams like, say, the Guardians that might be on the fringe, or even, the Twins that are making some interesting moves. Like, could they sneak in? It's a little bit more easy to imagine. But now that the schedule is about to shift in 2023 to that more balance, that's just going to be long-term good for the Blue Jays. So I think the Jays have reason to be really pleased with the CBA overall. Just the fact that it's 12 teams is good. The fact that the schedule balancing is definitely good for them. The one thing you do look at is the CBT and going up to 230. Jays are not going to be there. Yankees probably are. Red Sox often will be. So, that's something to be mindful of because, the Yankees, that's a lot of extra money for them to be able to work with. But you gotta beat the Yankees. That's part of the reality of life in the AL East, and it's nothing new for the Jays.
And the interesting thing, and this is many, many years away, but MLB is kind of slowly easing its way towards, I would say, expansion and realignment. When you think about DH in both leagues now, the schedule is getting more balanced. I I don't think it's imminent, but somewhere down the road, like the tracks are being laid to add 2 teams and blow up the divisions.
Yes.
That would only help the Blue Jays. And I don't know when that happens, but I do think some of these moves portend that happening in the future. So I do think there is more benefit down the road.
Yeah, I think my understanding is expansion wasn't directly tied to these talks at all. But hey, you look at it just logically, it makes all the sense in the world to go to 32. Maybe at that point you expand the playoffs a little bit or switch the format a little bit. You're looking at 14 divisions. Hopefully for Canadian baseball fans, there's Montreal in that equation too, because that would be awesome.
And last thing I'll say about expanded postseason, it does make it more imperative to make your roster as strong as possible going into the year, because there's likely to be fewer sellers, I think. At the deadline, there will always be sellers, but I think there will be fewer because there'll be more teams that are like, well, if things break right for us, like we might just sneak in, right, with an expanded playoff field. So I think it's imperative on the Blue Jays to build the strongest possible roster to begin the season. And it's also imperative, and we talked about this a ton coming off of 2021, it is imperative to have urgency in season to upgrade. If your bullpen is blowing leads and getting throttled in May, and you are losing games that, I don't know, if you happen to miss the playoffs by 1 game, you're going to look back at with a lot of regret. Does that sound relatable to anybody? You need to have the urgency to make upgrades right then and there. We've been over it. Simber, Richards didn't come soon enough. They came just too late. If there is a way to attach a higher value prospect to bring an Adam Simber in earlier in the season and address a present need, you need to have that urgency and you need to operate with that urgency. The value for the trade might not be as strong as you want it to be. You might lose the trade on Fangraphs, but you might not lose your season at the end of it. So I think that urgency has to be something that, the Blue Jays really operate with early in the season if things aren't going their way.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think also you look at just the importance of depth, and I'm looking at a schedule that's going to be compressed. I'm looking at fewer off days, more double headers, a shortened spring even. So your starting pitchers might not be totally stretched out. Man, you need to have a lot of arms in particular. They might expand rosters by 1 or 2 for the month of April, in which case, all right, yeah, so you have a Thomas Hatch around. But I mean, that's really not going to totally change things. You still need just good major league depth. And the Jays actually, in my opinion, are pretty well positioned on that front with more work to do. But it's imperative. I mean, you're going to see teams by the middle of May just gassed with the bullpens that are tired and rotations that are in shambles. And you might be able to get away with that in a format with 12 teams in the playoffs, but you don't want to push your luck. Like, the Jays need to make the playoffs this year. This isn't it would be nice. If they don't make the playoffs, their season wasn't a success. Like, I think that's pretty clear. So they got to get in.
Well, and it seems like they're having that sort of roster expansion discussion amongst the GMs, and I don't know what GM is right now is going to say, like, yeah, no, I don't want this extra roster spot. Like, I think it would be a benefit to everybody. I think it's obvious he did in 2020. You can do it again. It can only be for the first month, first 2 months, whatever. I think that's going to be imperative. And because, look, what did we learn from 2020? That in a condensed spring, when players are rushing through their throwing programs and increasing stress and intensity at a rate that they, aren't accustomed to, well, the injury rate goes through the roof. We saw that in 2020. I don't think it would be a surprise to see it again in 2021. Like, I do think that, the injury apocalypse 2.0 may be upon us here as we ramp through this spring training. And as a starter in this spring, you might get 3-4 starts, 4 like at the most. I don't know if that's going to be enough for some guys. Everybody's different, right? Some guys can get ready and get going really quickly and are just naturally more durable than others. And other guys need a much more purposeful and deliberate and gradual buildup. So I think we're going to see a lot more injuries in April and May, or in the first 2 months of the season, just as we did in 2020.
Injury apocalypse 2.0. Heard it here first. It's coming your way.
That's right. Let's step away, but when we come back, we're getting into the nitty-gritty of how the Blue Jays are finishing off their off-season work in this condensed spring training and what might happen next. All that and so much more when we continue on @TheLetters. It continues on @TheLetters. Arden Zwelling, Ben Nicholson Smith. Our producers are Nick Andrade and Christian Ryan. Ben, Yusei Kikuchi. It's not official just yet. I believe he's doing his physical today in Dunedin, but it will probably be official by the time people are listening to this. Has agreed to terms on a 3-year, $36 million deal with the Toronto Blue Jays on the other side of the lockout. Your thoughts, Ben, on the signing?
I like it. I think at a time that you can't have enough pitching, adding another good pitcher is just good. And Yusei Kikuchi is a good pitcher. To me, it kind of replaces Steven Matz. Like, that's, I think, the easiest way to look at this. Is like Gosman is your Robbie Ray replacement, and you've got Kikuchi as kind of your Steven Matz replacement, lefty back-end starter, and the replacement for Marcus Semien is probably still to come. They'll need a bat. So you look at Kikuchi, and he has been a back-end starter. This is a guy the Jays liked a lot before he signed with Seattle in 2019, scouted him extensively. They were in talks with his representation at that point. Whether an offer was made, not sure, but they definitely liked him. And he performed okay with the Mariners, not great. He had an amazing first half to 2021, then totally fell off the map. All kinds of hard contact allowed, ran into a lot of trouble, really bad finish to the season. So then he becomes a free agent, and the price here is just pretty reasonable. I mean, it's $12 million a year. That's basically the same AAV as Matt's, a little bit more for one less year. And to me, Kikuchi brings you a little bit more upside than Matt's. I think both of them, from a performance standpoint, probably project similarly. But when Matt's is on, he looks like a number 4 or 5 starter who's on, and when Kikuchi's on, he looks like a 2 or 3.
Yeah, I think that you and I, Ben, agree too often on things, but like I really can't disagree with literally anything you just said. Like, you took the words right out of my mouth. Like, it is so Matz-ish. It's crazy. You think about it. Like, what was Steven Matz coming off of 2020 into 2021? A left-hander with a hard fastball, some really useful secondary stuff, who clearly needed to make adjustments to mitigate hard contact and keep the ball in the yard. That's Yusei Kikuchi, man.
Yeah.
That's exactly what he is. Because make no bones about it, he was a below-average MLB starter last season. And that's because of his disastrous second half when he had trouble maintaining his velocity, trouble maintaining his spin rates, walk rates and home run rates went up. He allowed his contact management was atrocious, allowed all kinds of hard contact. Like, this is the classic Blue Jays taking a guy off of a really down year with some really useful stuff, getting him working with their pitching department, working with Pete Walker and Matt Bushman. But we know it's not just them. It is the cast of thousands of nerds behind the scenes with their spreadsheets and their databases saying, hey, you should actually throw this splitter a lot more often, or that changeup to righty is really effective. Let's use it here. Your fastball, you've been using here in the zone. Let's actually use it over here in the zone. It's going to play a lot better off of this secondary if you set up that pitch with your fastball here in the zone. So it's going to be about taking these ideas that I promise you the Blue Jays have for Yusei Kikuchi, distilling them, like making them relatable, and having the guys like Pete Walker and Matt Bushman who are in the trenches relay that to Kikuchi in a way that's digestible, so you're not just overwhelming him with information and ideas. So you give him something he can actually execute on and go out and improve and get the job done on the mound, and maybe end up with Steven Matz results, because that's what the Blue Jays did with Steven Matz. And Steven Matz had the season that he did, and then went for 4 years, $44 million with the St. Louis Cardinals. Kind of interesting. Pretty similar AAV to what Kikuchi got, just a little bit more term. Anthony Desclafani also got this 3-year, $36 million guarantee. So that speaks to how the Blue Jays feel about Yusei Kikuchi, and there's no guarantee that, the suggestions they bring to him and the tweaks and adjustments that they give him are going to work. Remember, the Blue Jays pitching group really liked Rafael Delisa's splitter. They really liked Shun Yamaguchi's splitter as well. Those ones didn't go so well, but there is a strong track record here from this group of identifying pitchers with untapped upside and who can unlock some of their obvious potential with some tweaks and some refinements and some adjustments. So it's going to be really interesting just to watch that process play out over the first few starts of the Yusei Kikuchi era in Toronto.
For sure. And I think that it's already a baseline of being a useful major league starter. So, even if Pete Walker and Matt Bushman and company just totally whiff and there's nothing, they come up with zero, then all right, you still have a useful major leaguer, someone who can take the ball every 5 days when someone else is hurt, or to get you through those double headers where you're playing 2 9-inning double headers and then 6 games in a row. Like, you're going to need a lot of starting pitching. And Yusei Kikuchi is someone who has at least been able to take the ball, even in a year that was distinctly mixed. And like you say, the contact issues are real. First percentile for contact allowed. That's as in the wrong end of the spectrum to be on. So that's
I'm first.
Not what
I'm
like
number one.
yeah. I've got to clarify that one. So it's there's some work to do, clearly, but he's I think on a 3-year, $36 million deal, it makes a lot of sense. I will just add, Rodon signed the day before, 44/2, and I love that deal for the Giants. I wonder if the Jays were in on Rodon. Both Boris clients, by the way. Jays continue dealing with Scott Boras and making deals with him, and deals that work for everyone. But I wonder if they're in on Rodon. Don't know. But they got Kikuchi, and he's going to help.
Yeah, Rodon also gets himself an opt-out in that deal, so you always like that when you're a player. The other addition we've seen the Blue Jays make to this point in what is sort of offseason 2.0 is Andrew Vasquez out of the bullpen, kind of a funky curveball first pitcher, huge movement on the breaking ball. Obviously, as with all guys like that, it kind of comes down to his ability to command it, but he's had a ton of strikeouts over his time as a pro. You don't love the walks, but that's probably to be expected with his approach. It's kind of interesting. He has a minor league option remaining, so he could go up and down. It is a big league deal, but the Blue Jays could option him. Obviously, they have to be careful with some of their option decisions this year because you can only option a guy 5 times now, and he has to actually stay down. Yeah. Well, yeah, they'll find the loopholes, right? Yeah, he has to stay down for 15 days unless somebody gets injured. Well, yeah, you could probably find a reason for somebody to get injured and end up on the IL. But IL stints are 15 days now as well. So, there are implications here. It's not as easy as just Hyun-Jin Ryu goes on the IL for 10 days and only misses 1 start. It's not so easy anymore. But, after Kikuchi, after Vasquez, do you think the Blue Jays are done on the pitching side? Do you think there is more pitching to come? We know they're going to add an infielder, but do you think there's more pitching to come?
I do think so. I think they should continue to add. I will say that, we've talked extensively over the course of the lockout, and even before that, about the A's and the Reds. And obviously, Sonny Gray's been traded to the Twins. Chris Bassett's been traded to the Mets. But you still have Montas in Oakland. You've still got Castillo and Malley in Cincinnati. There are, some different moves that you could look at. I don't see the Jays actively pursuing a high-cost, established starting pitcher in trade at this point. I think they've probably got their 5, plus Pearson, plus Stripling, and Thornton, and Hatch, and Kay. So from a pitching depth standpoint, not to jinx anybody here, they're going to need more than just those names that I listed. But you're probably, I think you're probably slowing down there, and the bullpen would be the logical place. Like, if you're going to allocate big dollars, and 40-man spots too are becoming a premium too. When you think about Vasquez and Kikuchi both going on, now some IL stuff could shift around there. But to me, long story short, I do think there's room to add a reliever, and I think there's a need. I mean, for all the reasons that we talk about with respect to starting pitching, just how many innings you're going to have to get through, expanded playoffs. You get there, great. You play a 3-game series. Need to have good relievers to get through a 3-game series. And as you said off the top, I don't think we're going to see as many sellers. So a lot of reason to go out there right now and be aggressive on Kenley Jansen, Colin McHugh, and others.
Yeah, I think there's big time reason to add still to this bullpen, which may seem a little counterintuitive, as you said. Like, a lot of names in that bullpen mix right now, even non-roster names like David Phelps involved in there, but I just don't think you can build out enough depth this season. So, as you mentioned, like, Colin McHugh is a guy that, the more I think about him, the more I look into him and what he's done on the mound, the more I think he would be an absolutely tremendous fit for this team. And obviously it's going to come down to value and what he's looking for. I mean, Kenley Jansen, obviously. I mean, this is a guy who has some of the most elite stuff as a back end relief weapon in baseball. Obviously, getting to sort of the end of his career, it would seem, but still undeniably really useful and really, really difficult to square up. You mentioned Oakland. Call them about Lou Trevino. See what's going on there. See if they want to move him, right? That could be an option for you. There's still like an Andrew Chafin and a Ryan Tepera on the free agent market. Like there's still a lot of options out there, which is why I think the Blue Jays are probably okay with letting the relief market come to them a little bit and kind of finding the value. And, I don't know that they're going to go out and overextend themselves for somebody unless they really, really do like somebody. But, I don't know, it's kind of interesting. I was looking at guys like Adam Ottavino and Brad Boxberger as dudes with like really interesting fastballs and like just really useful kind of pitch characteristics, like stuff that the Blue Jays have liked in the past. And the Blue Jays have let those guys go on to other organizations and haven't gone and made a deal there. So I wonder if the Blue Jays are kind of willing to be patient on the relief market right now. But, I agree with you. Again, I do think there is still another pitcher to be added here before, spring training is through.
Yeah, it's interesting, too, when you look at the types of additions the Jays have made so far. And so it's all been pitching, basically, and it's all been through free agency. If you're talking about Gausman, Yimi Garcia, and, of course, Kikuchi now, and Vasquez. So you're looking at using money. So they've still got their trade chips that existed going into the offseason. And they have spent, a decent chunk of money. Now, I still think there's more. I think that you look at this team's payroll, it's already up there, depending on, how exactly you're calculating it at this point. Looks to be over 150 already, and potentially well over that by the time the offseason's done. I mean, we could be talking by the time this season's done about a record payroll for the Blue Jays. I think their record currently is around 160, 170. Wouldn't be surprised to see it go over that because they do remain in talks with big name players. Like even after adding Kikuchi, they're still out there canvassing the market. They're still out there seeing what the options are, as you would expect. And that's, I don't think they're done.
Yeah, pretty interesting that, payroll coming off of what we were saying earlier in the podcast about the lack of revenue this team has enjoyed over the last couple of years. Yeah. And like, look, you listen to this podcast long enough, we don't like cry poor for any ownership, and we think that all MLB clubs ought to be spending like more on player salaries. But yeah, the Blue Jays have not seen much revenue in a very long time, and they have been sending a bunch of money out the door, not only on payroll and like record contracts and free agency and extension for Jose Barrios, but also retrofitting minor league stadiums that, I mean, you're just leaving that stuff behind. The Blue Jays aren't going to be playing in Buffalo and Dunedin any longer. You're also, start building the PDC, which there's a lot of taxpayer money that went into that as well. But the Blue Jays have made significant investment there too. So it's interesting to see that, the payroll has continued to be sustained at a pretty high level. And yeah, it keeps going higher. I wonder, like, I do think there is still a trade here. Like, I still think it just makes sense for the Blue Jays to be involved in the trade. And I wonder if that's how they address their need for an infielder at this point. I don't know. Will the Chris Bryant bidding get like just a little too steep for the Blue Jays? For Trevor Story, like the guy wants to be a shortstop, right? Like if he was willing to play third base for a season on a Marcus Semien type of deal, like 1 year, $22 million, whatever, reestablish your value, the Blue Jays would be all over it. I don't know if Trevor Story is going to be all over that, but who knows, man? Like, so you get to the end of, or you get through spring training here, maybe he starts getting a little squirrely if he doesn't have a deal and there aren't shortstop needy teams and he's not seeing like the Baez deal that he thinks that he can go get. Maybe he takes a Semien type of situation going forward, but I don't know that that's on the table right now for the Blue Jays. So, beyond them, I wonder if they go out via trade, and like the names are obvious: Jose Ramirez, Ketel Marte, Matt Chapman. You could look at some more like non-obvious trade targets like JD Davis with the Mets. Like I wonder if you could shake him loose there, or you could do Didi Gregorius from the Phillies. I've wondered a lot about a Randall Grichuk for Didi Gregorius framework that could make sense with the contracts being exchanged. And then you wonder, too, if the Blue Jays actually add an outfielder through free agency connected to Kyle Schwarber a little bit. I still think Michael Conforto would be a great fit, again, on the Semien type deal, short-term, high AAV bring in a left-handed bat that gets on base at a great clip, and then, use some of your current outfield personnel to address the infield via trade, I think that's still very much a possibility for the Blue Jays as well.
Yeah, I like Conforto and Schwarber a lot. I think Conforto, if you can get him on a 1-year deal, love that. Schwarber, you're probably not getting on a 1-year deal, but 3 years. I mean, I part of me thinks, man, the Kendrys Morales lesson, we gotta learn that lesson. But part of me says you also need to have good bats, and the Jays need another good bat, and Kyle Schwarber is that. So I think he makes sense. He would make them better in 2022, and this season matters. And so I think that, Schwarber, Conforto, lefty bats, those guys are both really interesting. But, among that group, like you listed a lot of names there, some bigger names, some smaller names. Does anyone, like, out of the bigger names, bigger name infielders or position players, do any of those guys seem like easier to envision in Toronto than others? Like if there was one or two that you could actually see ending up here?
So the big names, as far as infield on the free agent market, it's really just Brian and Story, correct? If you want to talk big names.
I mean, and assuming like Freddie Freeman would technically be an infielder, but it's the Freeman one to me has never really, I don't know. I'm sure the Jays have done their diligence. I also just think he's going to end up in Los Angeles or Atlanta, but maybe I'll be wrong. But I just think it's LA or Atlanta for Freeman.
Right. So we're really just talking about Brian Story free agent wise.
Yeah.
And then trade wise, I mean, we all assume that there would be a way to pry away a Jose Ramirez or a Ketel Marte, but we don't actually know.
Right.
Well, I guess Carlos Correa is a pretty big infield free agent too.
Good point.
Forgot about that guy.
Yeah. The best of the bunch. Yeah.
Oh yeah, you know him? His market's going to be really interesting, right? Because he's like Corey Seager, just kind of set this standard. That he would now want to surpass. And I saw the Ken Rosenthal bit the other day about, maybe he'll take 1 year at a super high AAV, Correa would, which would be really interesting. I mean, that would have to be in excess of the Scherzer deal, I imagine. That would be kind of a really fascinating thing to happen. I doubt it. I imagine that, that's just to kind of drum up some interest. And I'm sure that, I bet that there's still a very substantial long-term deal out there for Carlos Correa. Don't know that I see the Blue Jays signing it. So I don't know. To get back to your question, I mean, Bryant, right? Yeah. I mean, I just don't. If Story comes down to what the Blue Jays are willing to pay, sure. I think if he would, and if he's willing to play third base, short-term high AAV, sure, let's do it. But yeah, Bryant probably.
Yeah, because with Story, too, there's even some concern around his arm. So it's would he have to play second in that case? And then you're doing Espinal and Biggio at third. Espinal looks, to be in really good shape, by the way. So that's a good sign for the Jays. But, it's still a long season. So, yeah, with Story, it's tricky. I really don't see Story's market collapsing. I look at the Angels, I look at the Mariners, the Phillies, Yankees. I mean, I know they got kind of Falefa, but... that infield to me, I don't know, defensively, it poses some questions with the Donaldson acquisition. You got Donaldson, Gleyber Torres, and Voit or LeMahieu. Is that going to be a good defensive infield? I mean, I don't know. But yeah, it's tricky. There are a lot of moving pieces here. I'm not sure that I have an easy answer for who I think they would get. I could almost see Matt Chapman just because we know he's available.
Right.
And we know that the Jays have pieces that could appeal to Oakland. I'm not saying you build it around Zach Logan, Kevin Smith, but those would be really nice secondary pieces to be going back. And then maybe you add in a reliever too, and you do all your shopping in one spot. So, that's one thing I could look. But Schwarber too, they like Schwarber. That's an interesting one.
I wonder if we have to almost realign expectations a little bit, because I wonder if the infield addition is perhaps a little underwhelming, which I'm throwing out Didi Gregorius a bunch, and people, if the Blue Jays acquire him, people are going to look at his statistics last year and not have a fun time of doing that. And then the other one, and you mentioned learning lessons or lack thereof, Jonathan Villar. It seems like the Blue Jays have not learned much of a lesson from the Jonathan Villar experience of 2020.
Man, I cannot recall tuning into more moments of a player getting picked off or caught stealing than Jonathan Villar. My distinct memory of him is him packing up his stuff out of the dugout and walking into the clubhouse. And we were not there. We were not there in the clubhouse at that time. We did not have the opportunity to ask questions of VR or his teammates on or off the record. This is one of those times where I would have loved to have access to actually understand what happened. But we do know that he was removed from a game. I think he was pinch hit for. Then he went to the dugout, took his stuff, and left into the clubhouse, which does not scream good teammate. So, we'll see. I was not impressed by Jonathan Villar from what I saw of him in 2020. I was very underwhelmed, but he's had a very successful big league career. And so, I'm sure he can help someone. I'm sure he can help someone in 2022. If I was the Toronto Blue Jays, I would not be in a hurry to make sure that person was me.
Those are the things that are kind of at odds with each other with Jonathan Villar, right? Is that like outside of that stretch in Toronto, he's actually been really productive. Like he's actually been a solid big leaguer in a lot of ways. Like not a very good defender, but a guy who brings you some speed and a guy whose bat has been perfectly fine at the big league level. Like Blue Jays fans just saw up close and personal, like what has to be the worst month of Jonathan Villar's last 3 years. And like not just like statistically either, like as you mentioned, aesthetically, like watching it, he was freelancing. Like he didn't seem particularly connected with the team or what they were doing, again from a distance, but like we all saw it. But here's the other thing though, right? So what the reported offer I think was a year and $6 million. I think Hector Gomez had at that. Man, sometimes the value is too good as a front office. Like sometimes you look at 1 year, $6 million for Jonathan Villar and you're like, yeah, we're going to do VR plus. Fine. Like we'll just take VR on that money because that value is really good for VR. Honestly, like that is like really good value for him if you could get it. Like think about it this way. Let's do a little game called Player A and Player B. All right?
Great.
Player A, Player B are both middle infielders. They're both second baseman, shortstops. They can play either one. They're both like 29, 30 years old, right around there, right? They've both been durable over the last 3 seasons, well over 300 games, well over 300 plate appearances, right? So those are similarities between these two players. Middle infielders, durable, 29, 30 years old. Player A has, over the last 3 years, an OPS plus of 99 and a Fangraphs WAR of 5.7. Okay. Player B, OPS plus of 106, so 7 points higher than the OPS plus of player A, and a Fangraphs WAR of 7.8, so essentially 2 wins higher than player A. Player A, Jonathan Villar. Player B, Javi Baez.
Wow.
Just saying. So is Jonathan Villar as good of a ball player as Javi Baez? Absolutely freaking not. Yeah. Would I much rather have Javi Baez 1,000 times out of 1,000? Way better defender. I mentioned aesthetically, like way more fun to watch. Like obviously, like the swing and miss is like absurd and insane, and has to catch up with them at some point. But the point that I'm making is that like just value wise, over the last 3 years, VR has not been that far behind Baez. Only 2 wins behind him via Fangraphs WAR. Only 7 points behind him via OPS plus. Baez got like 6 years, 140. To get VR at 1 year, 6, if you just take the names out of it and everything out of it and just look at pure value, I could see why a front office would be like, that's pretty good value. It's kind of hard to turn that down.
Yeah, I can see it. That's an interesting comparison for sure. I think, man, like the Javi Baez deal, like he definitely makes the Tigers better now, which is really important. And they're a team on the rise, and that's nice for them short term. Long term, like you say, with the swing and miss, I have concerns over how that deal is going to age 4 or 5 years from now. But that's another story. I think when it comes to VR, you're right. I mean, he's worth a roster spot. If you're rounding out a bench and you have the option of, I don't know, Josh Palacios or Jonathan Villar, one of those guys has shown he can hit major league pitching and the other one hasn't. So I get it. If you're rounding out a bench, you want to have options. VR does some things. Man, it would not be I just would not set out to do it. You know,
No,
I would
he's not option
explore
number
other
one.
avenues first. Yeah.
He's
Yeah.
not, but at a year, $6 million, man. Like, because even then, if you cut bait halfway through the year, it's like, all right, whatever. We spent $3 million on him, and it didn't go that well, and we're gonna spend $3 million for him to go away. Like, year 6 million, like, you know, what was like Yamaguchi earning per year, right? You know, like it's not a small amount of money, but it's not a substantial one either. And like, look, it's not for nothing. Jonathan Villar in 2019, 107 weighted runs created plus. In 2021. 105 weighted runs created plus in substantial playing time too. Brings along a bunch of stolen bases in that time too, right? Like it brings along a bunch of counting statistics that, you know, I don't know, you can like argue whether, you know, those he put those up on some like not great teams, right? And like,
Always has.
when has he contributed to a winner, right? And to a winning culture? Like you can make that argument, certainly. But like I'm just saying, like I'm open-minded and I see it. I could see how a team could get there.
So you would make the offer one at 6.5?
Depends on the context of my budget, how much money I have to work with. If it's VR plus, thinking about it, right?
Yeah.
Thinking about
I think
it. Building out more
of
depth. I don't know that I'm handing him an everyday role, right?
No. Yeah, but as a bench piece.
As a bench piece, 1 year, $6 million. What's worse could happen?
Yeah, I mean,
If I
you're
have the
not
money.
getting, I mean, and you look at, you know, so what does $6 million get you in free agency? Like we saw another Blue Jays fan favorite, Brad Hand, sign for that exact amount, if I'm not mistaken. So, you know, it's just you're not getting the impact players for that price. You're just not. But I don't know. Still, it just doesn't land with me. I just maybe it's you know, I don't know what specific bias it would be, but I guess like
It's because you saw it, right?
Yeah,
You
it's
saw it. You saw it for a
availability
month,
bias, I guess. Yeah,
and
it's
it
just
was
like,
hard to watch.
It was awful. Yeah. So I just think I would be a no. I don't know. That's a very maybe that's irrational. I think I would be a no.
What do you think about Josh Donaldson being a New York Yankee? What do you think about that?
I think it's interesting. I mean,
Isn't it?
think so. You know, it's interesting, right? Like we're talking about team players in VR who historically have thrived in environments where the team hasn't done as well. Baltimore, Milwaukee, like he's been on some teams that have been losing teams. Miami. Maybe that's a coincidence. You know, like baseball is a game where you can have all kinds of people working together, and maybe we just saw VR at a bad month. Okay, that happens. So I don't know. But at the same time, you look at that in contrast to Josh Donaldson. And Donaldson is someone who has been in winning environments and who does really well in winning environments. And in talking to people over the years who, you know, Donaldson himself, people close to Donaldson, he is viewed as someone who is much better in winning environments than losing environments. And of course, you can kind of say that about anyone, but there are certain people, and maybe, you know, I don't know, like maybe Marcus Semien is one of them, where he is just going to be extremely prepared in any circumstance. He can go to Texas, losing team, bring his discipline, bring his focus, thrive. I can see that.
Same guy at the ballpark every day, no matter what is happening.
And Josh Donaldson is going to always prepare. He's going to always try. He's going to, but just like his vibe, like he gets, and he would say this too, I'm pretty sure, like he just starts kind of losing it if the team is losing. Like he just kind of, he kind of like it doesn't go as well. And with the Yankees, there is such a structure there and there is such a winning culture. I think he's going to be a great fit there. And of course, there's the calf, there's the health questions. You know, we don't know how often he's going to be able to take the field, but when he's on the field, like I think he's going to be really good, and I think he's going to love it.
Yeah, I mean, as if you needed to add any more juice to like the Blue Jays Yankees series this season. Let's just drop Josh Donaldson right into the middle of it, and you and I, Ben, are going to sit back and watch those fireworks, right? Everything that you just said, plus the fact this is a guy who loves hitting at Rogers Center, like has always produced there in various uniforms. Loves sticking it to the Blue Jays. Just considering how his exit went, but also like he's Josh Donaldson, so he just kind of loves sticking it to everyone, right? Like that's just kind of the personality. That's the sandpaper that he brings to the game. Like this is just gonna be awesome to watch. Other than the fact he has to shave, and oh by the way, like watch Josh Donaldson go off as a Yankee. Like, watch him be another one of these guys who like looks like they're getting over the hill and like looks like, getting in the mid late 30s and maybe aren't that guy anymore, who then like land in New York and suddenly have these sort of like late career renaissance, like Carlos Beltran at 38, 39 seasons, or like Brian McCann was like really useful for the Yankees late into his career. Chris Young had like a big like late career season with the Yankees. I think Encarnacion like wasn't terrible with the Yankees. I think he was useful
Matt Holliday,
for them.
I think Matt Holliday had a really big year, like
That
after
rings
his
a bell.
Cardinals Rockies days. Yeah.
Right. Obviously like A-Rod, Teixeira, guys like that. Like it's just kind of a time-honored tradition that the Yankees find these super veteran dudes, and just something about their environment just allows them, and maybe it's their ballpark as well, just allows them to just have these great sort of last hurrah seasons. Watch Josh Donaldson like get that explosiveness back, right? Because he's lost a little bit from his heyday, obviously, as would be expected, right? This isn't 15, 16 Donaldson. Watch him get those hips firing in his swing again and just shoot some absolute missiles all over Yankee Stadium, and then come to Toronto and have some really big series against the Blue Jays. It's just going to be fun to watch the competition.
Yeah, to me, I see Donaldson as a guy who plays 110 games for them. Like, I definitely don't see a full season from him, but when he's out there, I think he's going to be really good. I think that, DH, third base, I could see him OPSing 850 to 875 with 25 to 30 homers in that short period of time. Like, I think the bat's still there, and so I like it. I think it's really interesting, not only from Donaldson's standpoint, but then to get Gary Sanchez out of New York. Defensively, as I mentioned before, the Yankees infield has some questions now, so I'm not sure how that's going to play out. But the Yankees can't be done. I mean, they might be on the fringes of the Freeman stuff, depending on how that unfolds in the next few days. But they should be on Correa. They should be in on Story if they don't get Correa. I still think there's room to add an infielder, and then if Kiner-Falefa is coming off your bench, or if there's another move that has to be made, you trade Luke Voigt or whatever the case, I think you can do that and make the pieces fit.
So this is quite literally breaking right now as we record. So I don't know if we have enough time to react to it. But Matt Olson is going to be an Atlanta Brave. Oakland.
So Freddie Freeman is not.
Matt Olson to the Braves for a massive package. And yeah, Freddie Freeman's not going back to the Braves if Matt Olson is an Atlanta Brave, which means Freddie Freeman could be a New York Yankee. Means he could go and play for the Los Angeles Dodgers. Means maybe you don't close the door on the Toronto Blue Jays as an option.
Wow. My guess is we see Freddie Freeman to the Dodgers within 12 hours.
I wouldn't be surprised. I think that's the most likely thing. But it'd be interesting if there's a way to fit him in with the Blue Jays.
It definitely would.
Right?
I would not complain about that lineup.
I was thinking about this the other day, right? Because I get, it's because it doesn't look, there's the positional fit isn't there. We've been over it, right? Like, it doesn't make sense for a million reasons, but it does make sense when you kind of think about like the returns on adding another elite hitter to an already like deep lineup of elite hitters. Like, what's the opposite of a diminishing return? Like, that's kind of what Freddie Freeman would do for the Blue Jays. Like, it would be an exponential return, right? Like, it would just compound the interest, because it's just like, it's fewer outs in your lineup. It's, it's a better plate appearance ahead of and behind your other hitters. It wears down the starting pitcher that you're facing. It wears down the bullpen. It forces them to throw more pitches. It allows the guys on your bench to see more pitches. You kind of see that when you add like a really good hitter to an already really good and deep lineup. Like, it just has this like progressive trickle down effect on other players. Like, there are knock-on effects there. That's why Schwarber like makes some sense to me, because like, yeah, you'd be taking a hit on defense in left field, I imagine, assuming he's going to play left field, although it's not like Lourdes Gurriel Jr., Gold Glove candidate Lourdes Gurriel Jr., by the way, is anybody's idea of a defensive gem in left field.
He's not a good defender. He is not a good defender.
And,
the Jays clearly believe that with their decisions.
And neither is Kyle Schwarber, is the thing, right? But so you're not putting out your best outfield defense, but you're adding Kyle Schwarber's bat to the lineup. So you're adding like 4, 5, 6, pitches of plate appearance to the lineup. Like you are, adding that approach, and that grind that you put starting pitchers through. Like I always hear this from pitchers, and like it's a hard thing to quantify. But pitchers talk about it all the time is how there aren't breaks in the Blue Jays lineup. Especially last year, how there just wasn't like, it was like you would get through that gauntlet of like Springer, Teoscar, Vlad, Bo, Simeon, etc. And then you would get to like Alejandro Kirk, who just puts his barrel all over everything. And you get to Lourdes Gurriel Jr., who can get his bat to all kinds of stuff around the zone. Like how there just wasn't like a soft spot. There wasn't an area where as a pitcher you could like catch your breath and breathe. Like you were just in these battles and just in these like grinded out like fights throughout the lineup. And I do think like there is an intangible impact there to adding a really like discerning, good professional, patient, good swing decision hitter to a lineup like that. I think there's a carryover effect to other players that it's really hard to put a statistic on, but that is real.
Well, and it has been quantified for sure. I mean, I don't have the numbers in front of me, but there is a quantifiable advantage to having a lineup that's really stacked with good hitters. And the Jays had that last year. And I mean, yeah, like you think about Lourdes Gurriel Jr., okay, he's not a great defender. Well, neither is Kyle Schwarber. That's okay. Freddie Freeman's a first baseman. Like you're not basing your defensive plans around him either. But the same with Vlad. That's okay. You can have these guys who are limited defensively and get away with it because your offense is going to be that good, your pitching staff is good, and then up the middle, obviously you have to be good, and that's where Danny Jansen, his continued development, worth watching this year. He's going to be a huge defensive centerpiece for this team, and then up the middle, there's still a question as to who's playing second base. That's a key position. Bo's continued development at short, and then what can Springer bring? Because you need to be strong up the middle, and right now the Jays project more as like a starting pitching and offense team, but every little advantage they can get defensively will help.
It's like we talked about, last season. You hear about the Blue Jays lineup. It's, it's too similar, right? It's too many right-handed guys who, have a ton of power, but, maybe don't get on base as much as you'd like to. Oh, are they too similar? Well, I don't know. They scored 100 or like 850 runs or something like that. Like if you get to 850 runs on the season, does it really matter how those runs get there? Like, does the process really matter when that's the result? Whatever it takes to get you to like your 110 to 115 weighted runs created plus as a team, does it matter how you get there? Just get there, right? And then now all of a sudden you're scoring a ton of runs. Like you said, your pitching is going to be better. You've like Gosman, Barrios, Manoah, Ryu, now Kikuchi, and like the depth of your starting pitching is a lot better as well when you're layering in like a Stripling and a Pearson. Guys like, unheralded guys like a Logue and a Francis who like aren't going to blow you away, but can come up and give you a capable back end start. You're not looking at like the Buddy Boshirs of this world anymore, right? Like you were looking at somebody who's going to come in and should be able to give you a quality big league outing. Like just add the offense. Who cares what it looks like? Just get your runs and let the rest take care of itself.
Yeah. And you look at the kind of totality of where the Jays are at, pending, more moves, and not only for them, but for other teams. And the Jays they're in a really good spot. Like I'd say the Yankees and Rays and White Sox and Astros belong in this conversation too, but the Jays are one of the best teams in the American League. So that's a really good place to be, money to spend. Haven't traded a single prospect this offseason of significance. And, they're set up to do some really interesting things, I think, in the next few months.
All right, we should get out of here before anything else happens. Chad Kuhl just signed as well. That was a guy who I thought the Blue Jays should pick up for their bullpen, but
where'd he go?
Looks like he went to Colorado. So good luck with that. But maybe they're going to let him be a starter. That was probably the opportunity he was looking at to be a starter. I wanted the Blue Jays to get Chad Kuhl to pitch out of their bullpen because he's got some like really wicked stuff that I think could have played up in a bullpen role that he started working on with the Pirates last season. But alas, was not to be. They'll have to go with one of my many other great ideas. You are Ben Nicholson Smith. You're on Twitter at B Nicholson Smith. My name's Arden Zwelling. I'm on Twitter at Arden Zwelling. Our producers this week were Christian Ryan and Nick Andrade. We want to thank them a lot. As we said, ATL every week from here on out. Baseball season has started. ATL season has started. A lot of stuff coming your way. We're going to be in Dunedin shortly, producing lots of cool stuff with the Blue Jays that we're excited about. and just excited for the season, man. Ben, we're here. It's happening.
That's right. Yeah. Thanks to everyone for listening, and glad that anyone who's on for the first time, thanks for joining us. A lot in the works, as Arden said.
No doubt. And until next time, talk to you later on At the Letters.